Joining me now to discuss this and more is Republican Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. Nice to see you. I do want to start with that meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. What's your level of hope or confidence, whatever word you want to use, that this broad peace deal will actually happen?
Well, this is one where President Trump has really leaned in both in this relationship and in his support for Israel, both for, as he has defended Israel when Iran has attacked it directly and providing direct support to Israel, and in also attacking Iran directly, and in making sure that he has a very strong relationship directly with the Prime Minister. So as the president has made, seeking peace a very strong tenet of his second term, this certainly is one where, of course, he has high hopes that both with his personal relationship, his strong, personal commitment to Israel, and his personal commitment to peace, that he might be able to achieve a deal here.
And is there a point at which you think that if it doesn't happen, which everybody believes, hopes that it will for everybody, for humankind, that the president will have to do something that he hasn't done so far, which is break with Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, I don't think it's an issue of break, but certainly is an issue of pressure. And in this instance, we certainly have seen where the president has led. I think he has provided both support for Israel, support for the Prime Minister, but at the same time, he hasn't been hesitant to show where there is a difference, a gap between his view and the Prime Minister's in direction and where they need to go. And I think certainly you're going to see that today as he tries to lead in the direction where he thinks the Prime Minister needs to go in order to be able to achieve a peace deal.
Let's look at another place on the globe where there is a very hot war that the president said he hoped to make peace and hasn't been able to do so yet, and that is Ukraine. You just returned from a congressional trip there. First, what did you learn that you're bringing back to your colleagues, including your party leadership?
Well, on the ground in Ukraine, the story is much more encouraging than what you hear in Washington, D.C. The Ukrainians are it's not just the resiliency of the Ukrainian people and not just the fact that they continue to fight both inspirationally and the technology that they bring to the table, what they have done with drones and anti-drone technology, their cutting-edge technology that they bring to the front line, and how they have held the Russians. But it's also, what we're seeing in the gains that they have made. But we also know that we need to provide additional pressure upon the Russians. The Russians have been able, by selling their energy, have been able to, through production, bring additional munitions to this fight that really is being funded by the West. It's being funded by the EU. It's being funded by our economy, buying things from China, buying things from India that are funded by the energy of the economy of Russia. We need to put sanctions upon the economy of Russia, and in doing so, we will stop the aggression and impact their ability to fund this war. And there's a bill. Lindsey Graham, Brian Fitzpatrick in the House have that bill. We need to move it. We need to put this pressure on Russia.
Well, do you think that there is any chance at this point of that moving? Because so far, Speaker Johnson has been reluctant. Senate Majority Leader Thune has also been reluctant, despite the fact that their fellow Republicans, as you just said, are pushing it, and they have very broad support. And now when I say it, I mean more sanctions that you were just describing.
Yeah, I think there's momentum in the House, and I think as the message gets out as to what's happening in Ukraine, and really the fact that we're funding the Russian war machine, and that we have an ability to impact it and really change the outcome here. I think that that momentum will translate to a momentum on the House floor, on the Senate floor, and I think the Speaker needs to put this bill on the House floor. We need to send that message and give the president on his desk this bill and impact Russia's ability to fund their war machine.
Can I just quickly ask you? You talked about providing Ukraine more help. The vice president said over the weekend that the U.S. is considering providing Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles. Those missiles would place Moscow itself within range of a Ukrainian attack. Is that a good idea?
Well, I think Russia it needs to feel the pressure from this. Currently, on the front line, they stand back and then, fire into Ukraine. And Ukraine needs the ability to be able to fire into Russia, to be able to push them back from that front line. To be able to do so will relieve some of that pressure and allow Ukraine to push Russia out of Ukraine, as the president said, to take back some of their territory. I think that they said if they have that ability for long-range fires, and I support their ability to do so.
We are waiting for a press conference out of Michigan, so if I interrupt you, I want to apologize ahead of time, but sure. I do want to try to get in a question about the indictment of the former FBI Director James Comey. The president stated hope that there would be others. Of course, this happened 5 days after the president posted on social media telling Pam Bondi to bring criminal charges against political enemies, including Comey. What's your reaction to this?
Well, Comey really isn't a political enemy, but political enemy is somebody that runs against you or that says bad things about you. He really is someone who has misused, in my opinion, his political office, his FBI office. He went against the national security advisor, Michael Flynn, I think in an inappropriate way. He used the FBI's position, I believe, in a way to undermine the administration of which he was a part of. I think he was dishonest in many ways in which he operated, and he was certainly part of, and he was found to be part of, I believe, to be part of the Russia hoax that was trying to undermine the president. Most recently, he just did a tweet of 8647. This is not just a political enemy. This is a person who I think was undermining the administration he was a part of.
Okay, let's just say everything you said is accurate. Of course, I would say that Comey and others would take issue with some of those. But let's just, for the argument's sake here, say yes. That is separate from the justice system and using the president being very clear about using the justice system.
He was actually part of the justice system. I mean, that's actually part of.
No, I know, but now should he be indicted?
He was part of the justice system itself. He was misusing the justice system itself.
But that's not what he was indicted for. He was indicted for allegedly lying to Congress.
As a representative of the Department of Justice system, as the director of the FBI, and that's what he's going to be. That's what this case is about.
Okay, so you're good with this. It sounds like. I'm so sorry.
Well, I think what needs to happen. I mean, obviously the case was in litigation, so it will proceed.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.